What Paul does not pray for is just as amazing as what he actually prays for. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. My name is Chris Bailey. This is part 4 of our 5-part series, Prayer Power, and looking at reasons to be thankful and to pray. You know, when Paul is going through the things that he's praying for, the Bible's so good because God is so good that even his omissions have just as much meaning as his commissions. In other words, what he does do is just as important as seeing then what he does not do. It helps us to understand his character. This is what allows us to trust him sometimes, even though we can't trace him, because we've learned him in the no's and the yeses, in what he says and what he doesn't say, in his effort to communicate with us. But before we get into the lesson, thank you for watching. I hope it connects with you enough to watch it to the end. Also, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay in touch. And if you want us to come to your school or church or group, send me an email. Send us an email. That's contact@changeministry.org. So let's get to this list of Paul's requests and what he does not ask for. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 9, for this cause we also, since the day we heard it, did not cease to pray for you and to desire that you might be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding. So on the one hand, Paul is praying, he's saying, I want you all to know what God wants. I want you to have a knowledge of his will. And that's important because I have to be careful myself sometimes to where rather than me going to God and asking his will, I go to him and ask him to bless my will. You know, when we go to him and we're asking him to put a stamp, validate, certify, notarize what I want. That's the difference with this prayer. The prayer is that we would come to know what God wants and find it not just from an intellectual standpoint, but to find the will in order to understand his way, the who that he is. Even here in verse 10, he also asks that you walk worthy. He's praying that they will walk worthy of the Lord unto all pleasing, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. So again, increasing in the knowledge of God, but that first part where it says that we would walk pleasing. We live in a world that is locked in a pleasure principle where we are told and we're encouraged over and over and over again to get what you want, buy what you want, go where you want to go, do what you want to do. And this whole idea where it becomes an I-centered existence versus what if I said, I want to live my life in a way that's pleasing to God. That's what the psalmist said. That's what David said, that he would be pleasing to God. And in that pleasing God, sometimes we might have to put what we want on the back burner. But the fact that Paul is asking that and praying that the church would be pleasing to God, you know, this is a big deal because I notice with a lot of Christian music, even what is considered to be Christian music today, it's very I focused. You know, regardless of the genre or style of Christian music, it's kind of all about us, you know, encourage yourself, you know, I am XYZ, or God is doing this for, it's really focusing on us more than on him. And that really becomes because of the extension of what's going from the pulpit to where a lot of preaching today, it's focused on the listener and again, being seeker-centered versus focusing on the shepherd. So the message is not just a motivational speech, or it's not just an inspirational thought, but when it's a thus saith the Lord, and when it comes with power, not of authority, but the affection of God in sacrificing his only begotten son and seeing the gospel now as us coming to God, being brought from ourselves into him, it changes the focus. It's not about us. It really becomes, because it is, about him. This is one thing that Paul does not ask for. Instead, that we would be pleasing to God. Finally, in Colossians 1:11, strengthen with all might according to his glorious power, unto all patience and long suffering with joyfulness. We repeat, strengthen with all might. Whose might? According to his power. Paul is recognizing and praying that the church of Colossae would be God-powered. Kind of going back to what we were talking about with it being I-centered. That's important because an I-centered life usually leads to an I-powered life. In other words, this is what I want, so I have to figure out ways to make what I want come to pass. And I'll ask God to back me up if I need him just in case. Versus in a God-centered existence, in a Christ-centered gospel, he's everything. I can't do anything without him. And I will know, and others will know that I know that because I'm constantly asking for help. That goes back to the part one, how we don't outgrow the need for prayer. And sometimes that might be why we're not praying, because we don't think that we need to pray. But the Bible's making it clear. We're going to continue to go in the right direction. We're going to have to grow in that direction. And the only power, the same power that allows us to grow, is the same power that allows us to go. And it's the same power that brought us to life in the first place. And that's the power of God. Yes, the Bible's so good that even what it doesn't say, it's just as poetic and just as important as what it does say.